All right. So I'm David Cooper, and with me today is Hannes Herrmann. Hannes, of course, has a lot of experience these days with running the final year capstone computing projects, and I'd like to get you to say some things about that.
That's appropriate, since you're the one who got me involved in the first place.
My commiserations. My apologies, I should say.
Yeah, fair enough.
So they've evolved a bit over time, and I think over a number of years you've put a lot of work into trying to figure out how to solve certain problems and help to scale them, I guess. So what are some of the issues you're dealing with, I guess, overall?
Well, the first issues, as you probably remember, is that they scale particularly poorly. At that point, the students were doing individual reports. I think it was weekly, wasn't it? And they were doing code reporting, and it was not particularly efficient. It also didn't really follow industry practices, which is a problem. Now, I, at the point, of course, didn't know what industry practices were, because I've never been a developer in industry. I'm a web developer, yes, but not a software developer. But luckily, what I am good at is talking to people, so that's what I did. We already had some good partners, like Amistad, for example, and Talos, and we had lots of students who'd graduated and gone there, come back to the ComSA. So it was easy enough to talk to students and industry and whatever. And I still try to do a lot of reading when I can, Ars Technica and that sort of stuff. I've got a bunch of feeds. And not the more technical feeds, because I'm not a more technical person, but still. The point is, I got this idea that industry, when doing any sort of large-scale programming, does this thing called Git, or possibly Mercurial at the time.
I've heard that.
Yes. So I thought that this would be a really good idea to help the students merge their code so they don't have to do it manually. And of course, it would be a good skill for them to learn. And one of the problems I was addressing is that sometimes it's hard to tell which student does what when, but if they're using a repository that we own, then we can see what student does what when very clearly.
That's a very good point. I do remember the time when we had those weekly submissions, and to a kind of bureaucratically minded academic like we often are, it like filling out paperwork is great, but then you realise the reality of it, and you have all of this processing to do. But yes, Git is both authentic, is what people actually use in industry, as well as being very convenient for us, I guess.
Absolutely. And one of the things I was trying hard earlier is to make the projects more authentic while reducing the reporting workload on students and, of course, the marking workload on us. Because we had a relatively small number of students, and you and Mike were spending a lot of time doing that, and then when I got pulled into it, I was spending a lot of time doing it. So I thought that wouldn't be ideal.
Yeah.
So I redid the reporting as well. So there's 2 semesters for the normal capstone. There's, of course, also the work placement alternative, which is separate. That only came in recently, so just start with capstone. The idea is that the first semester is mostly design, the second semester is mostly coding. I've sort of formalized that. I know our students love to just jump in and start coding, and if you're doing full agile, that works quite well. The problem is most of our students aren't really skilled enough at group coding, the agile process and that sort of thing, to be able to do that and generate a successful project. Our good students absolutely can, but we need to have a structure that we can apply to all of the students. And I also found that applying a structure to offshore campuses especially, I needed to have a very rigid structure, because one campus in particular, they had 50, 60 students, up to 75 at one point, and I think the lowest mark they had was 85%. Even where for students, really, I couldn't see any contribution whatsoever.
Yes, obviously we love people to get 85%, but we want them to demonstrate some understanding for that.
Yes. So capstone is one of the, I think, higher averaging units, which is nice. And at one point, someone from the ACS accreditation panel, three visits ago, told me that no one should ever fail capstone, which I disagree with vehemently. Their opinion was, by the time someone gets to capstone, they should, they should have already been failed and terminated. But that's not reality. especially with some of the new rules we've had in the last couple of years. So we do need to track contributions. So I worked very hard to focus on evidence to allow students to say, hey, look, we think that our group isn't getting fair contribution. And because I'm making them, so for example, Capstone 1, they're doing online documents, I say, right, give us an edit link to your Google Documents.
Yeah.
Then we can see exactly the edit history. We can see what edited what at what point.
Yes.
And so therefore, if we need to go digging, we can. And when that student says, I did 80 hours of work in this last 3-week sprint, we can match their edits on the document or their commits in the Bitbucket to their claimed time.
Yeah.
And we can see some discrepancies. And normally, having a quiet chat with a student is sufficient. I have had to report 1 or 2, which is interesting because, of course, the central panel doesn't know what to do with those, but still, it's something I try to avoid. But if
it's a kind of falsification of data.
It is, yes. Yeah. Essentially, what they're doing is they're falsifying a main part of the rubric that they're using to get marks, and more importantly, they're being unfair to their fellow students.
Yes.
Because they're saying, I'm doing all this work, but actually they're not.
It's like almost a cliche that the bane of students' time at university, the good students, is when they have to do a group project.
Yes.
And there's all these passengers on the project.
Yes, and you see the students who really struggle, who have lots of fails or whatever. They go into a unit, a group work unit other than Capstone, and they go, oh, now I've got an 80. And you go, well, either they really bloom in group work units, or,
Yes.
And we have had some problems with some of the other units, but, that's okay, we'll work through that.
Yeah.
Evidence is the main thing. So also in one of my other units where I do have a group assignment, I won't go and check the assignment by default, but I let students submit evidence, and I say, if you're submitting evidence to me, I assume you want me to check it. So the groups that don't submit additional evidence, that's okay, I assume everything's fair. The groups that do submit additional evidence, same thing in Capstone. If everyone is saying everything is fine, everything's working, we don't need to go digging. But it's when students express concerns, even if, individually, confidentially, then we can go in and have a look.
Yeah, that makes sense. If everything is working, everyone knows that that's the case.
Yes, and of course sometimes that means the whole group is not actually doing what they should, which is where the supervisor needs to give clear warnings, essentially.
But if they're all in that category, then they're kind of all on the same page in a sense, still, aren't they?
Yes, the thing is, there's a big difference between doing a lot of stuff that seems okay, but isn't actually progressing things that much. Yeah. And it can be very hard for us to tell as supervisors, especially now that we've moved to full stack development. The students using technologies that we've never heard of before sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that was always a problem, I think, because there's always a diversity of different projects out there, and we probably you've continued this tradition. We try to make the projects interesting, and if the projects are interesting, they tend to be things that we haven't done before. So there's always a learning curve for us as staff members as well, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, so what I try to do is actually move the projects external as far as possible. So rather than having us give the projects as academics, I mean, we can, I've tried to use the projects as a way to get in contact with industry, with community groups, with other parts of Curtin. So we had a Marina Ciccarelli, you probably remember her daughter.
Yes.
So she's the Dean of Learning and Teaching over at Health Sciences, I believe. And one of her PhD students, Kavesh, just graduated with his PhD this semester. Yeah. And I was invited along to that. And she was kind enough to call out that a large part of his success was due to the excellent software written by our Capstone students for his project, really cool. Which is now, being used publicly and is the only software of that type in Australia. Wow. To help certain parts of, teaching relating to certain health practices.
That's an amazing outcome, actually. I hadn't been aware of that.
And I mean, there's the academic who was studying pearl diving in, I think it was Indonesia. I don't know. And he was doing some research on the damage that the pearl divers were suffering because they were, holding their breaths for so long, and he needed some software to track that. So again, our students did that. We had a group that was tracking skydiving because apparently they need to keep a journal. So that was their app. We had a company from Tasmania, a logging company from Tasmania, who wanted to be able to handle their log inventory.
Yeah.
Last year, I think we had a company from Singapore doing using AI to estimate feet size for semi-custom orthotics, sort of like to get between.
Right.
But we have a real variety of projects. Always have when I had time to go out and find them.
Yeah.
But the last year or two, that hasn't been the case, unfortunately.
It's a little trickier. It is a scalability problem?
It's a time problem.
Yeah.
You need to go out. You need to be part of all these events across Curtin. Be talking to people. You need to be, advertising to community. You need to be following up with the clients to, encourage them to tell other people. And at that point, you get the snowball effect where people come to you saying, "Hey, we heard,"
Yes.
But that doesn't necessarily happen unless you've got the time to go out and do all that sort of stuff, which is a workload thing.
And you need to keep it up, I guess.
Yes, you do need to keep it up.
Yeah.
And basically, since roughly the middle of last year, I just haven't been doing that. So yeah.
There's ups and downs, I guess.
Indeed. So that has caused some issues this semester.
How does that sort of thing work at our other campuses around the Indian Ocean?
It varies widely.
Yeah.
So one of our campuses, the capstone lead at that campus creates all the projects and is the client for all the projects.
Right.
Which doesn't work very well, but it's the only thing that they've been able to do.
Yeah.
But they are now handing over the projects to someone else, and they have my written advice that they find a better process. There is a problem with the rules as well. So, for example, if you go to Singapore, the students can't actually work for another company while they're students because of the visa requirements.
That's tricky, yes.
Yes. So they have people coming in from industry to give projects, but they're also academics who are associated with the university anyway. So it's not like community to community, but it is,
So even doing an educational project, well, what is effectively an educational project in the context of some other company would be against the rules.
I've been told that, yes. Yes.
That's interesting. That's a large part of what the value of the project is in some sense, I think. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a set project that's an internal project, like I've got a group working on a thing to handle capstone applications, because that's become messy as well. So I've got two groups working on that. I'll use the better solution of the two.
Yeah.
They'll finish at the end of this semester, basically. And that's still a real project. I mean, I'm a real person, a real client. It's not as good as having an external one, because that also has the bonus of connecting us. And the students tend to enjoy the, going outside. They see it as more real. The other thing, of course, is it does the connection, and it forces them to speak to often non-technical people. Talking to me, I know what I want, I know how to say it, so I have to try very hard to occasionally pretend to be a bit non-technical. I am not as technical as I should be, but for this point of view, I know how the projects work, so yeah.
Yeah, you raise a good point. We need to expose people to non-programmers somehow, to hire a whole bunch of people to come in and pretend to be like ordinary users, I guess.
Yes, other faculties actually do that. Yeah. They do hire clients as such to run various projects to be product owners. In our case, because the students are producing a product, we don't generally need to hire them. Yeah. But as there's a perceived squeeze in the economy and a perceived squeeze in workload across Curtin, that is becoming harder to access. So yeah.
And how does it work in general if you have multiple groups doing the same project? Does that work out?
I've done that a couple of times. It's not ideal, but because the students go through that forced process, they do have to choose their stack, and generally the stacks, when I've had two groups doing the same project, the stacks have been quite distinctive. And as soon as the stacks are different, you know the solution is going to be different.
So you're talking about different databases, different web services.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe different front end, whatever. Yeah. So one might use Node.js, one might use React, for example, whatever. And at that point, you know that even if they're aiming for the same thing, they are going to produce different results.
Yeah, they have to at that
level, I guess. That's going to be tested very much this semester because all the groups are doing one project.
That is very interesting, yes.
Because I only had one project offered by someone other than me. I had a project, I mean, I could have added a couple more. Yeah. But if I was expecting, maybe 7-8 groups, I got 13. Yeah. And I thought, well, 2 projects, 3 projects, you can't do that. It's just too much client time. Yeah. So what I've done is I've said everyone does one project. The client comes in during the workshops. So not only am I wandering around to talk to them, but the client will be there as well. And Reza's being very kind to help out with that. Yeah. He's got a very interesting project. It's software development with a cybersecurity flavor, so also the cyber and IT students will like it. Yeah. And I gave the students a choice between my project and his, and like 2/3 of them chose his, so that's great. I prefer it that way because that means there's the 2 of us in the room helping the students, and they still get the experience of having a client. They're still writing a real piece of software, and I'm going to try really hard. I've tried to catch Colin this morning, but essentially I'm going to try to get some funding to offer some prizes. Best solution, right? You get a prize. Most innovative solution, whatever prizes I can.
They're all starting from the same point, of course, so
they are. Yeah. Yes, it's a fair thing. Yeah. They've had the normal preferences for being groups. That's one thing I adopted really early, by the way. You remember Mike basically just had them put in CVs and allocated them himself to try to get balanced groups. I've said, let's give the students preferences. And I still do the allocation based on those preferences, but if I can make the student happy and still get a relatively balanced group, that's fine. Now, what I don't do is balance CWA. So I don't have someone with an 80 CWA with a 40 CWA normally, unless they say they want to. So I tend to have groups around different CWA groups, and often I tend to channel a group with lower CWA to somewhat more straightforward project, shall we say. Obviously, that can't happen, but yes.
It is just an argument that you want to give them a chance to work together, and I guess it is a little difficult for a really good student to work constructively with a student who's just kind of coasted through.
Often they even talk on different levels, but I also, frankly, CWA is a really bad measure of things. Yeah. So what I do is, I've been told right from the beginning, it was when Mihai was still running things, I have to have hard guidelines for how I allocate groups. I need to use hard metrics. Yes, I can consider other things, but I need to base it. And CWA is the easiest hard metric I can use. So what I try to do is build a group that is balanced by the majors, and I don't want 6 IT students or 6 cyber students or 6 software engineers, but half our students are software engineers, so 6 software engineers happens often. I want, you need a software engineer, but you really need a cyber student as well, because who else is going to make sure the thing is secure? And if we don't have enough cyber students, maybe an IT student is fine. The IT students tend to be better at networking, and they tend to really gravitate towards front-end development as well, which is interesting. So they tend to do that, and of course any project involving AI needs a computer science student. So I try to have mixed group from that point of view. So I might have 3 software engineers or 3 IT students, whatever, but I make sure that other types of students are in there, and I tell the students that and say, look, if you want to be in a group of your choice, follow those guidelines, right? And I had some groups again this semester where they did that, and I could just say, put it all together, right? That's a group, fine, next. And what I do is I just go through the list from top CWA. I'll have gone through before and highlighted appropriate comments and skills and stuff. And, then when I'm looking at CWA and their major and whatever, I'll look across as well, and if I see something highlighted, I might bump them up a bit if it's particularly appropriate. It's not an ideal system, which is why I've got students doing the work for me to automate the whole thing.
Yes.
But it's the best system I've found, and more importantly, despite the fact it's still in the end me assigning groups, they feel like they've got a choice, and I do follow their choices where possible. Yeah. So it just changes the perception from, oh, we're just being thrown into groups, to hey, I'm with the people I asked to be with.
I think that's good. I might wrap things up at this point.
Yep.
But that's been very informative, and I hope our listeners have a new insight into the complexities of group allocation and the technical challenges of the projects. But, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
And we'll hope and be rooting for you for the hackathon project to succeed.
I don't see any reason why not. Thank you.